A group of Russians tried to establish a foothold near the railway tracks not far from Pokrovsk in order to advance further toward the city. After successful airstrikes by drone operators from the Special Operations Forces, the Russian infantry was destroyed.
The enemy is trying to break through in the direction of Hershine, northwest of Pokrovsk. To do this, they are attempting to advance along several routes at once. Ukraine's defense forces are countering these attempts by cutting off likely enemy movement routes and striking them with available forces and means, particularly artillery and FPV drones. From a report by the 7th Rapid Response Corps of the Air Assault Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Telegram.
On the Pokrovsk section of the front, Ukrainian soldiers repelled nearly a third of all Russian attacks recorded on the front line. Military experts note the successes of the Ukrainian armed forces in the area of the Pokrovsk-Mirnograd agglomeration.
As of today, the situation looks like this. In recent days, the defense forces, right now it's scary. For the Russians, it will sound like this: the defense forces of Ukraine. They also managed to clear another 3 square kilometers of the city of Pokrovsk. Accordingly, the total area is 29 square kilometers, and as a result is under the control of the defense forces. It went from 13 to 16. So we see that at least 50%, maybe even a bit more, of this location is controlled by the defense forces.
In addition, the situation remains difficult but under control in the Lyman, Kupiansk, Oleksandrivsk, and Huliaipole directions. There, since the beginning of the day, Ukrainian soldiers have repelled more than 20 Russian assaults in each direction. Ukrainian soldiers blew up a Russian anti-aircraft missile and gun system called Tunguska in the Kherson region. The operation was carried out by several units of the Ukrainian armed forces. The fighters continue to significantly weaken the enemy's capabilities and cover their own equipment. The soldiers also showed the destruction of a Russian strongpoint in the southern Slobozhansky direction. The invaders tried to create a maze of dugouts and command observation posts here. Posts. Now all that's left of it is just a heat signature. Ukrainian defenders note that the methodical work on the Russian occupiers' fortifications continues.
In other words, bombs. Basically, the heavier the bomb, the better it levels their fortifications, if you can put it that way. After 10 kilograms of explosives drop on them, there's no way they'll come out unscathed.
The total combat losses of the Russian army since the start of the full-scale invasion have already exceeded 1,192,000 personnel. Of these, 1,730 occupiers were eliminated in the past 24 hours, according to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. According to their data, 6 tanks and more than 24 armored combat vehicles were also destroyed. More than 30 artillery systems and 1 multiple-launch rocket system were also destroyed. In addition, since yesterday, the Russians have lost 1 air defense system, more than 150 operational tactical-level drones, and 180 units of vehicles and special equipment. We will continue discussing the losses of the Russian army with our guest, Ivan Stupak, military analyst, employee of the Security Service of Ukraine from 2004 to 2015, is now joining us live. Hello, Ivan.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you as well for responding. I'd like to start with these staggering losses. How significant are they, in principle, for the Russian army, considering that in certain directions, and especially in Pokrovsk, where the fighting and assault operations from the enemy are particularly intense right now? The Russian army, the soldiers, the enemy, their troops, they even injure themselves just to avoid going into these hopeless assaults. In your opinion, how widespread is this phenomenon, and what is it really like? Are these losses currently being acknowledged in the Russian Federation? Do they have any understanding of these losses, especially within the enemy's army itself?
Look, we understand that all these things you've mentioned, they aren't regular occurrences in the Russian army. I mean, refusals, self-inflicted wounds, they do happen, that's for sure. But for them to be a widespread, regular phenomenon, happening all the time? No, that's not the case, unfortunately. Plus, there are repressions. Anyone who refuses to participate in combat operations or to take part in fighting risks being repressed. At best, they'll be thrown into a pit. Again, this is what Russian servicemen themselves say. They admit that this kind of practice exists. Either they'll be sent into local assaults without equipment, without helmets, without body armor, or they'll be wiped out. So once again, I'm addressing your audience and explaining that this is not something made up by Ukrainian propaganda. First and foremost, this information comes from Russian sources. So if you don't trust us, you can do a reverse search on Google, or look it up, or, I don't know, use Yandex, depending on your jurisdiction. And you can find all these reports, all these things. I mean, they're actually typical for the Russian army, even if not widespread. Regarding the losses, it's impossible to state the exact number of casualties. As of today, no one can really give a precise figure, but there are independent, let's say, researchers. For example, Mediazona and the BBC, they keep track of the deaths of Russian servicemen in this war, but not just say when a tank is hit. There might be 4 people in it, so we record 4, no more. So right now, according to the statistics, again from Mediazona and the BBC, they determined that as of today, that's 153,000 Russian servicemen who will never walk again, never celebrate anything, never rest again. That's it. They're dead. This is the minimum number of losses for the Russian army in this war, because for each of these 153,000 people, there is a last name, first name, and patronymic. Date of birth, place of birth, date of death, place of death, a link to the obituary, a link to the hero's desk in the region, a link to some memorial service. So all of these 153,000 people are accounted for. This is not an inflated number. In any case, this is much more than, for example, what the Soviet Union lost during the Afghan War. There have already been many examples mentioned. According to various estimates, the Soviet Union lost between 15 and 17,000 people. At the time, that was incredibly painful for a country with a population of over 200 million. You'd think it wouldn't be, but it was very, very painful. For comparison, the American army lost about 58,000 people in the Vietnam War. That war lasted almost years. 11, yeah, it went on for a long time. 58,000 people. And here, in less than 4 years, 153,000. Well, that's it. That's the hard number. That number might go up, but it definitely won't be less than 153,000.
The Russian army loses about 30,000 soldiers killed every month. This was stated by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy while speaking in Parliament of the Netherlands. According to him, the Russian dictator Putin doesn't care about this. Let's listen.
Putin doesn't believe in people. He only believes in power and money. He loses about 30,000 soldiers' lives on the front every month. Not 30,000 wounded each month, but killed. There was a month when 25,000 Russians were killed. Another month, 31,000. There is drone footage confirming these stats. Russian assaults are always insanely bloody, but Putin doesn't care. Russians don't count their dead, but they count every dollar, every euro they lose. That's why a strong decision on Russian money is needed, and these funds should be used to defend against Russia.
And how much do these kinds of loss statistics, both in personnel and equipment, actually influence the political arena, those who are listening and even more so? Now, during speeches in The Hague, especially when repressive issues are being addressed, how are these losses perceived at all? Is it important to them? Does it matter? Does it shock Europeans, or perhaps Western partners? Or are they also counting money and thinking about how critical the Russian Federation's economic situation is right now, and what they can do from that angle?
That's a great question, and honestly, it's probably one we should be asking our European friends. What do they think about this? Most likely, they don't fully grasp these numbers. Well, 30,000, what does that even mean? 30,000 or maybe 40,000. Where there's 40,000, there could be 50,000. People just haven't fully realized the scale of it yet. But if you use, for example, the population of some local town as an analogy, like imagine telling them, look, just picture the entire population of this town. In the Netherlands, for instance, imagine if everyone there was killed, completely wiped out, gone. Then maybe that could actually have some impact on people's minds. Because that's just how people are. They don't really grasp what a number means. He only understands things by comparison. If you tell him a kilogram of steel, he won't really know how much that is. But a kilogram of gold, that's already something interesting, because he can convert it into numbers he understands, like dollars, euros, and so on. And he might start imagining things, but when it comes to losses of 50,000 or 150,000 people, the human psyche, it just doesn't fully accept or understand these numbers. So you need more here. You have to give some concrete examples, unfortunately. The Russian army still has the ability to recruit soldiers, unfortunately, and they keep recruiting. Where they can't do it just with contracts, by attracting people. Come, sign a contract. This is how the usual ads work. Recruiters are a particular feature of the last maybe 6 months of this war, when a new layer of people appeared, so-called recruiters, who are ready to find the missing number of soldiers needed for a specific region. The number of soldiers they have to send to the war this month. It's no secret that every region has a quota, and they have to meet it. You have to provide a certain number, and if you don't, you'll have problems. And so for those regions that are having trouble recruiting people, recruiters show up and say, we'll find people for you. How many? 5, 10, 15,000 people? We'll find them for you. We'll bring them in and they'll sign a contract over you. It doesn't matter where, it doesn't matter in what condition, the main thing is that they arrive on their own 2 feet. It is believed from open sources that the regions pay this amount. For recruiters and high-tech hunters, it's roughly equivalent to 6 to 6,000. 6,300 euros. That is 6,300 euros per head of the person they brought in, who signed the contract from the relevant region.
Thank you, Ivan, for joining us. Ivan Stupak, military analyst, employee of the SBU.
Subscribe to The Gaze and stay updated on the most important events, top news from Ukrainian all over the world, in-depth analysis, exclusive reports and interviews, all on hand in our channel. Join our community of viewers and stay tuned.